Hey everybody, welcome back to the YouTube channel. This is Max Prime, back with the Story Arcs, and today I have a very special guest. I have a very special guest, author, writer of 357 Magnum Opus, Ghezal Omar. Hello.
Hey Max, glad to be here.
And the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm such a huge fan of graphic novels, and I'm a fan of giving me the alternative option, the alternative choice when it comes to comics and stories. And I was drawn to this comic book particularly for many reasons. And I have Ghezal here. And one of the things I wanted to ask you just right off the bat, like, what's your origin story? Can you tell us like what your background is for those people who don't know who you are?
Yeah, absolutely, Max. So I was actually born in Afghanistan, in the capital, Kabul, and moved to the U.S. I grew up in the Bay Area, so all my life I went to school here, and moved to Southern California for a bit. But I'm a California girl and Afghan American, so that's my origin story. We came here when the USSR invaded Afghanistan many years ago. So one of the first waves of Afghan refugees.
So when you obviously have developed into this great author, writer, what led you to first realizing that you wanted to become a writer?
It's interesting. I actually wanted to be a writer when I was in elementary school. I would write little short skits with my classmates after I'd be watching a movie and make them different characters, and it was for fun. And then around high school time, I wanted to be a director. It was just the cool thing to be was a director. And then, there was Pulp Fiction, a movie that really affected me. I thought it was influenced me. It was a really great movie, and I was like, okay, I want to make something just like that.
Cool.
And I applied to actually grad school for screenwriting. I didn't get in after at UCLA. I did get into another school, however, that was my top choice. But I realized you actually don't need to go to grad school for screenwriting. It's more for the networking. But I think deep down, I think everyone's a bit of a storyteller, and just one form of telling that story is writing.
So when you actually decide that you want to write, like, how did you, first of all, how did you decide, like, okay, I'm going to write this particular type of a novel or that type of novel? Because there's all different type of writing, like writing comics, writing romance novels, writing, just short stories, like, how did you decide, like, what particularly you wanted to start writing?
Yeah, I've always been a big film buff. I've always loved the movies and television and such. So when I actually wrote 357 Magnum Opus, it was written as a screenplay, 102-page screenplay. And I wrote that back in college. Actually, it was written quite some time ago, heavily influenced again by the films of Tarantino. And then when I moved to Afghanistan from 2009 to 2013 and did move back for a period, I looked at it. I'm like, oh my God, I got to rewrite this. So I rewrote about 75% of it. And I was like, you know what? I think this might actually make a pretty good graphic novel as well. So when I moved back to the U.S. In 2013, that's when I started the journey of getting script adapted into a graphic novel.
That being said, when you decided to actually write this story, this graphic novel, like, how long did it take you to write? You probably get that question all the time. How long does it take you, or did it take you to write this book?
It didn't take me too long. Well, the first draft, I mean, I did it in a few months, a little bit more on the prolific side when I was younger. And then, I didn't touch it for such a long time. And then in Afghanistan, again, I was just focused on editing and such. It just took a very long time to get the book done, even though the writing was all done. It was just the journey of finding the right artist to create it and such. That was the difficult part of it. I'm working on another project right now, and I got the first draft done over the weekend. If I'm in the flow, it'll come out naturally. Sometimes I just have these blocks and I can't, and I'm looking for some kind of inspiration. So if the inspiration's there, it's a lot smoother.
Is that kind of like well, that's called the writer's block, right? Where it's just like you can't think of something to write, or you're just stuck, or is that how that works? Or
The thing is, like, I try to get it right the first time as much as I can. I hate having to go back and make a lot of edits. So uh, you can write it. you just might not like it, and it's like, okay, great, I spent all that time writing it, but then it didn't work out. So I do a lot of outlining. I have a whiteboard in my room, so I structure things constantly, just making sure all the scenes match up, versus just writing on the cuff. So I'm this one I'm working on right now. It was kind of on the cuff, and it just came out so naturally. But after the first version, I was like, okay, it's good enough where it is, and I can go back and add some scenes, remove some scenes, and change dialogue and such. So it just really depends on the storyline. I try to start with a really cool character, and if I have the character in my head, and then it'll be inspiration. It might be meeting the right person who has a cool story, or just a natural swagger about them, and I'll be like, okay, I can create a character out of this person. What can I do? What kind of situation can I put them in? So.
And that's where I've always was curious with writers and like how, like when you create a story, do you create the story first without actually creating like the characters' names and their backgrounds, or do you just have like the story in mind first, or do you have the characters in mind first? Like how does that, so the characters come first sometimes, or the story?
Yeah, for me, it's always the characters come first.
Okay.
So for 357 Magnum Opus, uh, the initial story began as just, I wanted it to be like, I mean, thinking back, it was just supposed to be like a day in the life of these hitmen, and they're not killing anybody, but they're having like a barbecue, and then I had a male character, female character, hadn't really developed them, and then suddenly, the story kind of evolves as you start working on your character and you're learning about your character more. You're doing more research, and as you develop that character, you know what situations they would be in, what decisions they would make. So that helps shape the story. And this one I'm currently working on that should be out next year, once I work with an artist team. That one, you know, uh, I was trying to work on the prequel for 357 Magnum Opus, but I was in Las Vegas a few weeks ago for Unicon, and I had this really sassy Uber driver, and she was just telling me stories, and I was just writing it down. I was like, "You're awesome. This is like shaping up to be something. I don't know what yet." And 2 weeks later, I had the character in my mind, some scenarios, and then it came out naturally. So.
Well, that leads to my next question. As far as for once you have a story in mind, once you've written the characters, the background story, everything, when you're just ready to just put it into a book and go, like, what's the process then of like finding an artist, the whole collaboration piece? Like, what's that type of process like? Like, are you like looking at a catalog of all different type of artwork to try to like match what you have envisioned in your mind? Is that how that works with finding an artist?
Not for me. Well, at least for 357 Magnum Opus, I was on a tight budget, so someone had referred me an artist. And that individual kind of dropped out, and I had a few artists who did that. So they would be referred to me by others, but they would just realize that this is such a big project. I can't take it on. And fortunately, meeting Ming Chen, like I had seen some of his work, not too much, but I trusted him in his style.
Mhm.
For this next one, I am going to be reviewing portfolios. There are, books I read, comic books and graphic novels all the time. So there's certain styles I do like that I think would match a story, and some that I'm just like, I know, you know what, you're talented, but I just don't see the character drawn like that. So it really depends. What style you really want to go for, and really want to seek out that artist, and look at many portfolios and understand that they may get busy. They may not be able to finish your project on time. So.
And back to 357 Magnum Opus. So please, for those who don't know about this amazing, awesome graphic novel, please tell them what it's all about. What's the story about? Give us just a brief overview of the book.
Yeah. So 357 Magnum Opus is about a couple bounty hunters from Las Vegas, and they've been tasked to get a felon in LA. And they run into complications getting the felon. It's a simple story. It's a bit of a fast read. I don't want to ruin it too much, but it's got the badass female heroine character. It's set up as a screenplay, so it was really interesting working with my friend Flip to adapt this to a graphic novel, because there are certain scenes that are shorter than I anticipated. Some things you have to cut out just so it makes sense for the graphic novel medium. So, but that's the gist of it. So, without revealing the twists. So.
And see what everybody watching right now, like what people may not know is that I'm a huge like Tarantino fan. I'm well, a huge Tarantino style fan as far as for the movies, and just like how you said before about characters like bounty hunters who, like you think like everyday life of a bounty hunter that has killed people, but you're actually, you're looking on the inside of their everyday lives and stuff. And I love that about the you say Tarantino films and everything. So like what so besides Pulp Fiction, I was gonna say, what are your favorite Tarantino films besides Pulp Fiction? Is it just that one, or was there more? Have you just like gone down the rabbit hole of like those types of style films?
Yeah, there. I like pretty much every Tarantino movie that's out there. There may be one or two that are probably not my favorite, but he's just such a master of dialogue, and
Yes.
I actually enjoy everything that he puts out. It's always entertaining, even if it's historical fiction. It's always interesting to see his take on it.
Yes.
And other directors I like. I like Aronofsky. I like Fincher. I like David Lynch. So. I'm just getting to close out. I just saw Nomadland. I thought it was just brilliant, and I'd never seen anything like that. Where it was just so beautiful, and I was like, I wish I could have seen this in the movie theater, just the way it was shot, and it was so well acted, and such a touching story. So I am trying to open up, to other stories, other directors as well, and not just be restricted to the Guy Ritchies and the crime noir genre.
And that being said, so you also said like the original story was meant to be like like screenwriting and everything. So do you think it's easier to like is it easier to kind of like take a script that you were writing for a potential movie and then turn it into a book instead, basically? Because I mean that's where obviously people go in reverse. They write the book and then sometimes they take the book. Well, mainly they take the book and turn it into a movie. So I mean, is it like an easier process to kind of like do that? And it's like, what, I can just turn a movie script and just boom, like pop out a graphic novel or a book.
Gosh, it was so with 357 Magnum Opus, my friend Flip really helped a lot with the paneling and the pages and making sure being able to not lose the essence of the scripts, but also taking into consideration it's a different format. So things that you can do in film you can't necessarily do in the graphic novel, and the pacing and such. So uh, with that being said, when I was writing my current book, I actually didn't do the screenplay format. I have some certain rules in my head how long scenes should be, different parts where it's inciting action, climax, and having those elements. However, I just went straight to making it a book and as a script, so it didn't follow the necessarily that 3 act structure and making it 120 pages. It's very concise, and it's meant to be more of something more fitting for a graphic novel comic book first, and then maybe can be extended and made into a movie potentially.
And that leads to my next question. What tips do you have for someone who wants to get their feet wet and jump into like trying to actually like write graphic novels, write screenplays, screenwrite, or just in general, they want to like bring a story to life? Like what tips would you have for someone who's starting out?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the tips I would have for anybody who wants to write, I would read a lot of screenplays. I would watch a lot of movies. When you're watching a movie, watch where certain breaks happen. Watch for the inciting incident, the climax, the halfway point, the midpoint. Anytime I watch a movie at the end of Act Two, I can say, okay, there's another 30 minutes left because I already know when certain things are happening to a character, when I can expect the movie to end with the climax and such. And I'm a big fan of structure personally. Understand the structure, understand the movies, and just read a lot of screenplays. And even with a comic book or graphic novel, read as many as you can, and then also learn what whoever you're going to be working with for. So if you are writing a comic or graphic novel, and you're working with an artist, understand how they work. Be part of that process because it's very difficult. Drawing a book, they're getting your words and they're capturing it as an image. So understand how paneling works, how where lettering makes sense, why it's lettered a certain way, why it ends on a certain page. So understanding who you're partnering with and learning their craft as much, I think is really big as well. So those are the things I would recommend. John Truby has some really good books, a class or two. I wouldn't do anything too expensive, and just write. not to worry about it. It's not supposed to be great on the first time, and if it is, then there's something wrong. So, but be open to editing, be open to notes, and obviously follow copyright rules and get your work copyrighted if you want other people to read it. Um, but you don't necessarily have to also fixate on the full 120 page screenplay. There are so many things that are available to us these days. There's TikTok, there's Twitter, there's Instagram. You can make things that are short, snappy, build up your storytelling abilities through that media, through social media, and then work your way up to bigger things. So there's a lot of great storytellers on these different channels at the moment. They necessarily haven't made a movie or written a movie, but they do a really great job within that 1 minute, 2 minutes to grab the audience's attention, and then you follow them and you want more. And so embrace different media. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a movie.
And my next question would be that since you've written this graphic novel, it is like for a comic book fan like me, where growing up, I never really knew the difference. Like, what's a graphic novel? What's a comic book? Until I think my first graphic novel I read was probably like The Watchmen. So that kind of like got me into like, oh, this is a graphic novel, but there's pictures, and a lot of people are like, they think it's a comic book or whatever. Like, I'm like, no, this is a graphic novel, just because there's pictures in it, this is a graphic novel. So anyway, that being said, what if you could write any character, any comic book character in the world, who would it be and why?
Any comic book character. Wow.
And not just like, well, it could be either just one graphic novel, just like one story, set in its own universe, its own timeline, and it has a beginning and an end to the story. Who would you write?
So if I can write one story, well, I have so many that I'm planning to write. It's a matter of, again, that inspiration. I would like to write one regarding Afghanistan,
Wow.
and basically put it in a more positive light. We've had war in the last 40 years, but I don't want that just to be the only story. During my mom's time, uh, they lived in this golden era where she went to university. They all had education. They grew up without war, and then things completely changed in the 80s. I would love to be able to tell the story of Afghanistan before all the chaos. And even afterward, when I moved there for a few years, I met some awesome people. We made a lot of progress in the last 20 years. It's unfortunate what's happening now, but just to find that right story. So I wouldn't say necessarily a character. I do have one in mind. It's I haven't like fully fleshed it out, but he's basically he's called a chowkidar, and a chowkidar is the the guy who guards your guest house typically. And they weren't very common in my mom's time, but when I was there, it is a war zone. Things are happening, but when you're staying somewhere, they hire a security guard to stay at the place. And I remember meeting one, and he was telling us some of his stories, and I thought it was really interesting, just their perspective of the time that they've been there, what they've seen as an Afghan, and experiences with the expat community, with the international community, with the Taliban during the wartime, and just day to day life. I feel like I would love to tell that story. So once the inspiration comes, I will definitely work on that.
And that being said, what other projects are you working on as far as for, I know, like I said, we talked about 357 Magnum Opus, but I know you mentioned like you're working on other things. I don't know if you could talk about it or not, but like, I mean, what are your plans on now? Like more graphic novels, more stories, more like screenwriting for films? Like what projects or plans do you have now?
Yeah, plans I have currently include. You'll be the first one to know, I guess. The next graphic novel is called Pimp Killer, actually.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so basically, she just kills pimps. There, someone asked me for a summary. I'm like, she kills pimps. That's your summary. Um, so I'm anticipating it being between 40 to 60 page graphic novel. Potentially, you can have other volumes to it. And I am looking to start sourcing a letter, an inker, artist, and such come 2022 early on. I'm debating how to do this. I'm kind of interested in documenting the experience of creating a graphic novel for people to see what goes into my part, what goes into their roles from beginning to end, getting it printed, maybe doing a Kickstarter, maybe self financing again, getting into a show, going through the whole marketing, just so they see how it's not that easy. There's a lot of things that are happening, and uh, but at the very end, when you have something concrete that you've done and you've worked on, and you're like, okay, it's done, it's finished, and getting into other people's hands and they enjoy it, you're like, yes. Some people don't, and it's like it sucks, but you can't make everybody happy. As long as you're happy with the final product, and you put your best foot forward doing it. Um, but that's my next project. I have so many that I have outlined, and that was not on my radar. It just happened to be in the car with a sassy Uber driver, and she was telling me some of the crazy things that happen in Vegas, and I was like, okay, keep talking, tell me more. And basically, it gave me the inspiration for this character. And then once I had her, I knew what her I had her name first, and then I had her occupation, and then just story rolled. So it should. I'd say it's about 95% finished at this moment. So
Very awesome. Very, very awesome. Um, the next to almost last question, since you go all across the country, you go into different type of like conventions and shows, like what are your next upcoming shows? Like where can people actually like see you? And yeah, so what's your plans like going into the end of the year and into the next year?
yeah, so I just did 4 shows already. They're really fun. It does get lonely when I'm by myself, so I've had the pleasure of having some friends in some certain cities and cousins come with me. The next one I have lined up is San Diego Comic Con Special Edition, November
Nice.
26th to November 28th. I'll be in the small press, and after that, LA Comic Con, Chicago C2E2, and I wrap it up with Comic Con Revolution in Ontario, California. So 4 weekends back to back.
Nice.
I will be traveling. I don't know why I agreed to do Chicago in December, but I've been to Chicago, lovely city. It only deserves to be seen in December as well,
Yep.
and I'm looking forward to it. So that should be fun. I did forget to mention that even though I'm working on my own things, I self-published it. I am also looking to work with other writers who want to get published, who don't necessarily have the resources to get their work out there. So some people, they're just busy, but they write great stories. Why can't we work with independent publishers to go ahead and help source the artists and get it financed and get it out there? So that is something I'm also going to be working on for my publishing portion of my company. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be me writing it. It's sometimes I do need a break, but I do like the whole opportunity of bringing a story to life and such. So trying to keep myself busy for 2022 with those projects.
So you heard that first. Any writers out there? Any writers out there who follow the channel? Definitely get in touch. Get in touch with Gazelle because like yeah, like that's awesome. I like that. That's very very awesome. Um, and that being said, how does everybody follow you? What it, how do we get in contact with you? How do we follow you? Social medias. Just plug yourself, please.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter at Gazelle Supernova, and and I'm also on LinkedIn, Ghezal Omar. And you can always email me at gazelle at 357magnumopus.com. So I'm available on any of those channels. Reach out if you have a great story. I can definitely help you get it to that next level and get it published. And yeah, so that's how you can reach me.
And I'll put those links in the description below so everybody has all our social medias, all our contact. Um, Again, if you have not read this graphic novel, you gotta go out buy this graphic novel. Like I said, it just makes me smile every time I like every time I say the name of it because again, I'm such a huge fan of this style of story. It just warms me and it just puts a smile on my face every time I think about the graphic novel 357 Magnum Opus. I want to thank you, Gazelle, for joining me today
Thank
and
you,
have an
Max.
opportunity to talk with you.
It was
And,
great.
and
Thank
again,
you.
hope like when the new book comes out, we'll get back together again and we'll be talking about the new book and I can't wait because I'm curious to see where this story is going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll be one of the first to get a copy. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, if you like this video, like, share, subscribe, comment. I'm Max Prime. This was Ghezal, and I'm out. Okay.